There's a reason some relationships feel calm for 5 minutes and then somehow turn into a psychological demolition site. And if you have ever sat there thinking, how did this go from a normal evening to this? You are not crazy. You are just watching a pattern you probably did not have the language for yet. And by the end of this video, you'll see what actually triggers that pattern, what it reveals about emotional control, and why the answer is less about drama and more about what happens when internal tension has nowhere clean to go. The real payoff is not just understanding the chaos. It is understanding what it protects, what it costs, and why it keeps repeating. Because this is not random. It is not just mood. And it is definitely not always about the things she says it is about. 1. What chaos really is. Let's be precise. Chaos in a relationship is not just yelling. It is not only tears, silence, accusations, or the classic "we need to talk" text that arrives like a warning siren at 11:47 p.m. Chaos is what happens when internal discomfort gets translated into external pressure. That is the mechanic. The nervous system is activated, attention narrows, and instead of sitting with that tension, it gets pushed into the room. That is where the temperature rises. And this is where a little science matters. Under stress, people do not process everything calmly and linearly. Cognitive load goes up. That means the brain has less room for nuance, less patience for ambiguity, and less ability to let a small thing stay small. In plain English, when somebody is overwhelmed, even a normal comment can hit like a landmine. That does not make the behavior good. It just makes it understandable. 2. Why calm can feel threatening. Here's the weird part. For some women, silence is not peace. It is exposure. When the room gets quiet, the thoughts get loud. Not always in a poetic way, more in a "why did he say it like that? What did that mean? Did I just look stupid?" kind of way. That is where anxiety reappraisal matters. The brain tries to label the feeling, but if it does not have a clean label, it starts scanning for a target. And now the target is the relationship. That is why a calm partner can accidentally become the mirror she does not want to look into. Not because he did something huge, because his stillness gives her too much space to hear her own noise. And once that happens, the room stops being a room and becomes a stage. Suddenly something needs to be discussed, corrected, clarified, defended, or emotionally audited. You know the type. A quiet night turns into a case file. 3. Why it keeps happening. This is where attachment patterns show up. People do not just bring preferences into relationships, they bring strategies. Some people move toward closeness when they feel uncertain. Some people move away. Some people create friction. Because friction gives them a role. If there is a problem, they are no longer sitting alone with their thoughts. They are in motion. They are in control. They are doing something. That is the key. Chaos often works like a shortcut. It replaces internal discomfort with external action. It gives the nervous system a job. It creates movement, and movement feels safer than stillness when you do not know what to do with what is inside you. Research on relationship conflict and emotional regulation keeps showing that escalation is often tied to how people manage stress, not just to what they are arguing about. So, no, the fight is not always about the dishes. Sometimes the dishes are just the nearest object with a pulse. 4. What it costs him. Now let's talk about the other side, because this is where it stops being theory and starts being expensive. A lot of men can handle problems. What drains them is not the existence of problems. It is the absence of peace. If every calm moment can be interrupted by a new emotional emergency, then home stops being recovery and becomes friction with furniture. That is not a small thing. Men often need a mental environment that feels steady enough to reset. When that environment keeps getting disrupted, the nervous system never really drops back down. The result is not always visible drama. Sometimes it is just fatigue, less focus, less patience, less desire to engage. The relationship does not explode in one moment. It gets worn down by repeated interruptions. And yes, I know, that sounds less sexy than a romance scene. Unfortunately, real life is rude like that. 5. The hidden payoff. Here's why this pattern is so hard to break. It works in the short term. When she creates noise, the internal noise gets covered. The brain gets a target. The body gets movement. The discomfort becomes external. Relief arrives fast. That is the trap. Short-term relief is not the same as resolution. It is just relief, and the more often the pattern works, the more likely it is to repeat. Attention gets pulled outward, the room gets noisy, the tension moves from invisible to visible, and the relationship pays for the relief one conversation at a time. That is also why this is not about women are chaotic as a flat insult. It is about a stress pattern, a response style, a way the brain handles discomfort when it cannot sit still long enough to let the feeling pass on its own. 6. What the science keeps showing. This part matters because it keeps the whole thing honest. Conflict research consistently shows that escalation is rarely just about one moment. It is about pattern, sensitivity, recovery, and how fast somebody turns tension into a bigger event. When attachment insecurity is high, stress responses get stronger, and small signals can feel bigger than they are. In plain language, if somebody is already carrying a lot internally, the relationship becomes the easiest place to dump it. Not because it is fair, because it is available. That is the psychological reality. And once you see it, you start noticing how often a peaceful atmosphere gets converted into emotional friction for no good reason other than relief. That is the part that surprises most men, not the argument itself, the speed of the switch. 7. The pattern you can actually see. You can usually spot this pattern before the full blow-up. It looks like this. She is fine until the room gets quiet. She becomes restless when nobody is reacting. She finds a problem that needs attention now. The emotional intensity suddenly rises. The original issue gets bigger than the original issue. That is the rhythm. And if you have lived it, you already know how strange it feels. You walk in wanting a reset, and somehow you are now in a debate about tone, timing, intent, and whether the air conditioner sounded dismissive. That last one was a joke. Mostly. 8. What actually changes it? The real change does not come from more fighting. It comes from being able to sit with the internal pressure without immediately exporting it into the relationship. That means learning to stay with the discomfort long enough for the brain to stop searching for an emergency. It means noticing when restlessness is not truth, just activation. It means not turning every internal ache into external chaos. And when that starts to happen, something important changes. The relationship gets room again. Not perfect room, just enough room for a man to breathe, for a woman to think, and for both of them to stop confusing motion with progress. Because once both people can recognize their own patterns, the relationship stops becoming a battlefield and starts becoming something much rarer. A place where tension does not automatically turn into destruction. That is the difference between chaos and control.